In the book of Proverbs, King Solomon introduces us to the two paths in life, the path of wisdom and the path of folly. Solomon also assures us that if we are inclined to choose the path of wisdom, then God will direct our path, God will protect our path, and God will correct our path. The destination of this path, Solomon tells us, is personal holiness, and the beginning of this path is a fear of God. The book of Proverbs reminds us that the awe of God ignites, supports, and defines faithful living. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.
Morning. My name is Terence Sikoryak. I'm one of the pastors here. Always sounds funny to say that, but how many people here are here on vacation? You're here on vacation. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Enjoy your week or your weeks, and we will be hospitable as well as we can be. Some of us have a little edge, but it's got nothing to do with you. So I promised somebody, for those of you listening online, hello, good morning, thank you for tuning in. I have to say hello to one special person, Lisa Mack's mom, Grace. Good morning, Grace, thanks. Grace told me she's a fan of mine. So when you have one fan, you must treat them very special. You're very good to them. So I'm going to ask you, as I ask every single month when I speak, who's doing the Proverbs challenge, reading a Proverbs it's more and more every month. Good job. Good job by everybody, man. You get to download God's wisdom first thing in the morning. I love that. And if you read a proverb, for those of you who are new, if you read a proverb every day, there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. So if you read a proverb every day, you get to 31, you go all the way back to 1. It's not redundant, though. I've been doing it for 47 years, and every single time I read it, I get something new. And so this morning is the 21st, and we're in Proverbs 21. So what sticks out to you? Right? What stuck out to me was verse 4. Verse 4 says, a haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked are sin. So look what Solomon is saying. He's saying the look of the wicked, the heart of the wicked, and the plowing, the work of the hands, are all sin. In Adam Clarke's commentary on the book of Proverbs, he writes that the prosperity and the posterity of the wicked is sin because it's founded in sin. It is evil in the seed. It is evil in the root. It is evil in the branches. And it is evil in the fruit. That's a great song. Somebody can write that, you know. It is evil in the seed. But they are full of sin because they themselves, the seed in their heart, the very soul, has sin in it. Their designs are evil from the get-go. And that was me. When I was a teenager, that was me. When I was young, I was reckless, right? There's a song by Chuck Brodsky, I was a restless kid. I was a little restless, you know, I had to do stuff. But it was bad stuff. And my friends remind me now, man, remember the time you did this? I'd be like, no, I didn't do that. They're like, yeah, you did. And 50 years later, we're still laughing. I was like, wow. But I was funny. And I was fun. And I was outrageous. And my friend Kenny Barkey he said, man, you're Tero. You're not Terence. You're Tero. And Tero is outrageous. I got a picture of me and some of my friends back then. 1973. Yeah, right? Look at that. How can anything good come? Nothing good's coming there. But I'm in the back, in the middle. But the amazing thing about that picture, Oh, that's Kenny Henderson. And he did play guitar. The amazing thing about this picture, everybody's alive. Everybody's retired. A couple of them are Christians. But we're all alive. There's a joke with Jacob, who works here. He says, every time you tell a story, the people in the story are dead. And he says, he was talking to Lexi one day, and he goes, don't get in Terence's stories. You'll end up dead. But the seed of my behavior in my heart was foolishness. It was rooted in this careless need to have fun and get attention. Just be outrageous. It branched out in all of my behavior. Terror was everywhere in my life. And the fruit was dishonor to my name and trouble to my home. You see, my mom did not find my antics amusing. And all it did was bring anxiety to her. And listen, young men, listen. You need to listen. Young men and old men. A man does not bring trouble and grief to his mother's house. A fool does, but a man doesn't. Check your heart, check your intentions, and then think, where is this going to lead me? Because you cannot sow foolishness and then reap prosperity and honor. It doesn't work that way, right? If you consistently sow apple seeds, what are you going to grow? Hey, what a sharp crowd here. Every time, right? There are no rogue apple seeds. They don't say, hey, you know what? I want to be a peach, so I'm going to grow peaches. No, you plant apple seeds, you get apples. I had to change the seed in my soul. If you are willing to change the seed in your soul, everything else will follow. The fruits are based on the seed. So that's Proverbs 21. That's our introduction, right? Today we find ourselves, we're going through the book of Proverbs, and I asked God if I could just live long enough to finish it. So I'm going to be 160. You know what? Y'all are going to be dead. I'm going to be preaching to new people. We're in Proverbs chapter 4, and in Proverbs chapter 4, Solomon tells us the acquisition of wisdom is precious to our hearts. And he says the path of wisdom and discipline will discipline our hearts. And so, we must diligently guard our hearts. In verses 1 through 9 in Proverbs 4, Solomon tells us the acquisition of wisdom is precious to our hearts. He says, listen, my sons, to the instruction of a father, and pay attention so that you may gain understanding. For I give you good teaching. Do not abandon my instruction. When I was a son to my father, tender, and the only son in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart take hold of my words. Keep my commandments and live. Acquire wisdom. Acquire understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the works of my mouth. Do not abandon her. She will guard you, love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom. And with all your possessions, acquire understanding. Prize her, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a garland of grace. She will present you with a crown of beauty. Solomon is telling us the precious possession of wisdom, and he's recalling the final words of his dad, King David. And David says to Solomon in Kings chapter 2, 1 Kings chapter 2, I'm going where everyone on earth must someday go. This is it, my son, my final words. I remember my mom's final words to me. They were words that have guided my life ever since. Such a prize to have that. Basically what she said, and you can, if my book's in the back, if you want to read it in my book, she says, whatever season you're in, it's the best season. And just view it as that. Enjoy it. Because it's the season you're in. And so David sets up his son with his final words. And he gives Solomon good advice. Take courage and be a man. Observe the requirements of the Lord your God and follow all his ways. Keep the decrees, commands, regulations, and laws written in the law of Moses, so that you will be successful in all you do and wherever you go. If you do this, the Lord will keep the promise he gave to me. The Lord will bless you and your descendants. Hey, listen. Having a parent who offers sound advice based in godly wisdom, that is a tremendous advantage in life. If you have parents like that, you don't even know the advantage you have in life. Because not having that, and we see them every day in the care team, not having that is a huge deficit. And you will always be chasing it. Such a gigantic advantage to have godly parents in your life giving you wisdom. We're not always right. Look, sometimes we're lame. I'm not, but some of you are. Well, I tell my kids all the time, look, I am 98% of the time right. So if you just listen to me, there's that small 2%, and you know what? That don't even matter. But we learn from experience, right? Those of us who are parents, how many parents here? You got kids, right? Look, we learned something from living. We've gained something. It's valuable experience. And we impart that wisdom to you guys. There's sometimes, even my dad, who struggled with alcohol for most of my life, and him and I, we never got along. But he taught me a lot. Number one, Terence, show up. You got to show up. If there's a family thing, if there's a wedding, if there's a funeral, you have to show up. Do the right thing. Now, if somebody's in the hospital, go visit them. You don't have to stay all day, but go visit them. And work hard. If you work hard, life will work out. You see, it matters who's speaking into your life, right? There's an endless amount of idiots who will speak into your life. They're on TV, they're on the internet. But it matters who you listen to. It matters the books you read. I read a lot of books, and I stand on the wisdom of every single one of those books, and my life gets higher and higher. My vision gets better and better every book I read. It matters the podcasts you listen to, and it matters the conversations you're in. It's a great quote I heard years ago. Our lives rise and fall to the level of our conversations. Let that sink in. What are you talking about? Solomon shows the promises about wisdom if we prize her, if we will exalt her. She will honor us, and if we embrace her. Wisdom will place on our head a garland of grace. She will present you with a crown of beauty. He promises that if we diligently pursue wisdom, we will serve. It's one of the things he says, we will serve before kings. We will not do obscure things. You will be recognized as a person of wisdom. The morning of my first day in college, I received advice from my mom and dad. They were mixed. My dad said, I was getting ready to go to college, and my dad said, listen. Don't screw this up. Like, all right, if you were going for, to get me enthused, you didn't get there. But my mom said to me, this is your time. This is really what you get to show who Terence is. I was like, mixed messages driving to college. And I went to college, and I went to my classes, and I came out, I was in the parking lot, and I stopped, and I said, wait a minute. This is going to take a whole different Terence now. There's no showing up high every day. No goofing off with your friends. No cutting out. Tarot is not going to flourish here. And I did flourish. With all the energy I had, I pursued that education. Pursue wisdom. Learn. David Novak, in his book, How Leaders Learn, he says, we grow in wisdom exponentially when we learn from, when we learn to, and when we learn by. We learn from Anybody and any experience that has something new, interesting, or valuable to offer. He says, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to try something and fail, because failure does not mean you're a failure. Failure is 100% information. Rod Carew is one of the greatest baseball batters in all baseball history, and he never got upset when he struck out. I looked at the pitcher. I got information. I know next time I get up, I know what to do. I know what his delivery looks like. I know what he's going to throw me. Failure is 100%. We learn from our failures. We learn to maintain an open, curious mind and positive relationships. Don't be afraid to be wrong. We learn the most from other people. There are other people who can teach you something. Other people who can't teach you something, right? But you got to have the wisdom to know. And we learn by doing the things that need doing. It will make the biggest difference. You know, when I first learned how to ride a bike, I was like, I'm never going to learn how to ride a bike. But my brothers were insistent. And that whole day, they tried me until I learned how to ride a bike. All these years later, I can still ride a bike. I can't walk and chew gum, but I can ride a bike. Don't be afraid to learn by. Second, Solomon says the path of wisdom will discipline our hearts. In verses 10 through 19 in chapter 4, he says, listen, my son, and accept my sayings. The years of your life will be many. I've instructed you in the way of wisdom. I've led you in upright paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. And if you run, you will not stumble. Take hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not proceed in the way of the evil people. Avoid it. Do not pass by it. Turn away and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they do evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But then he says, but the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. Solomon is explaining that God's wisdom disciplines our heart, and it is perfect. It's not always comfortable, but it's perfect. Last week, Jen and I were in Colorado. We were in a place called Frisco, which is up there, 9,000 feet. Let me tell you, you can't breathe up there. You can't breathe. People say, well, you get used to it. They sell cans of air. Nobody's getting used to it. They're buying air. It's like when I lived in the desert in California, that people said, you know, the desert will grow on you. Tumors will grow on you, too. So we went to this church, Rocky Mountain Bible Church, great church. Oh, it was a beautiful church. And the pastor, Mike Tharp, gave this great message on running with endurance. And some of our takeaways were what he said about God's discipline. He said God's discipline is corrective, it's instructive, and it's preventative. So I told him, look, I'm going to take that and expand on what God gives me to teach that. And he said, sure, go ahead and run with it. So God's discipline, God's wisdom is corrective. Solomon says, listen, my son, accept my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I've instructed you in the way of wisdom, and I've led you in upright paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. God's wisdom is our GPS, right? And where do you find that? You find that in God's word. You find that in God's wisdom. But sometimes we get off track. Sometimes, right, you got the GPS, says, reloading. What do you mean? Stay on the GPS. Sometimes we don't trust the GPS. You know, back in the 70s, I worked in a gas station in Hicksville, New York, where Billy Joel grew up. He grew up in Hicksville. And a Crown gas station right there on Jerusalem Avenue. And people would stop in and ask for directions. And just like our amusement, we'd always give wrong directions. You got to go down here. You get to Old Country Road. You go to Old Country Road, you take that all the way to Hempstead Turnpike. You turn right on Hempstead Turnpike and you go down as far as Garden City. Now, and the people are like, well, you worry they're going to come back? They ain't coming back. I don't know why we did that. That was cruel. But there was no GPS. They depended on us, and that was their mistake, depending on us. But we get off track, right? Some people do give us the wrong directions. But people get off track because they've been hurt. Religion is a great place to hurt people, right? To control and manipulate. My friends on Long Island, in the 1970s, when I was in California coming to Christ, they were on Long Island coming to Christ. There was this revival over the whole country, the Jesus movement. And some of them got very, very involved in the church, and they were burned. And you know what? 40-something years later, they've never gone back to church. Some people become disheartened by the church club. We don't want to come off like that. We're all your friends. People get off track because they view the church as too cold. We can be cold. That all or nothing mode of thinking. We must, and there's a great quote by Chris Vallotton where he says, we must love others more than we love our convictions. But we can't love others instead of our convictions. I love that. I mean, I love you. I still have my convictions though, but I love you. People get off track because they buy into the God of their own making. Augustine wrote so many years ago, if you believe what you like in the Gospels and reject what you don't like, it's not the gospel you believe, but yourself. And some of us have made up our own gospels. But God's corrective wisdom reminds us truth is the path. Truth is the path. Not my opinions, not my thoughts, but truth is the path. Not what we perceive in church, not how we view the church, not our own opinions. Truth is the path. Second, God's disciplining wisdom is instructive. God's instruction in the Word keeps us on the path and also offers us clarity. Look what he promises. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. We can walk with confidence and clarity with God's Word. We can take bolder steps because God has lit the way. It says the path of righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. We are not left to stumble around in the dark. Psalm 119, 105, it says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. When we were in Colorado, anybody ever hear of Red Rocks? That's such a cool place to see a concert. It's this amphitheater that is hewn out of a mountain, but you got to climb up this mountain. And everybody says climbing up the mountain is part of the experience. Yeah, I don't think so. I took a cab. Taking that cab with that guy was part of the experience. And you get up there, and we saw a great concert, and then when it's over, now you got to climb down and the steps sometimes are uneven, and the lights weren't on. So everybody's relying on the guy with the phone, and you can't really see, and this could really be terrible. And then the lights go on, you can see, and then you can see. And you can walk with a little bit more confidence and boldness. Without God's wisdom and instruction and his direction, we're just figuring out as we go along. That's what we were doing that night coming down the mountain. But let me ask you something. If you're just figuring it out as you go along, how's that working out for you? How's that working out for the world? God's leading too. It ain't for the curious. It's for the serious. Because his leading sometimes hurts. And third, God's disciplining wisdom is preventative. Solomon says that the wicked will not find rest. They can't sleep unless they do evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. Their wickedness makes them restless, but there's a solution to the burden, right? Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. the writer says, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus. What's holding us back in the race? It's the weight of sin. Can you imagine being in the Olympics and say, oh, we got this whole stuff you got to bring with you, all these weights and anvils. You ain't winning that race. You ain't even getting off the line. We can prevent a lot of problems by dropping the weight of sin. Imagine running with those burdens and then having them taken off of you. You ever read Pilgrim's Progress? What an amazing tale. And you'll get a chance when we do communion this morning to let go. To let go of those weights that are holding you back. And so we've seen that the acquisition of wisdom is precious to our hearts. It's a precious thing. The path of wisdom will discipline our hearts. And because this is so critical, Solomon says we must diligently guard our hearts. He says, my son, pay attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. They are not to escape from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their body. Guard your heart. Guard your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Rid yourself of deceitful mouth and keep devious speech from you. Let your eyes look directly ahead and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet. With all your ways be established. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Turn your foot from evil. Solomon's saying, hey, get my attention right here now. You know how Matt says, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. All right, look at me. Pay attention to my words, he's saying. Incline your ear to my sayings. They are not to escape from your sight. Listen, don't forget this, man. Keep them in the midst of your heart. This is really important. And here is really the key. Man, this is a life verse for me. This verse right here in verse 23, it's a key to life. He says, guard your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the well springs of life. My friends and I met this guy in the 70s. I don't know how we met him. He wasn't one part of our crew. We were out somewhere or something, and he was a security guard for a really exclusive club in New York City. So, of course, we asked him, hey, could you get us in? And he's like, there's no way you guys are fitting in. In 2 seconds, somebody said, they don't belong. Plus, one of my friends would start a fight. I know it, for sure. One of my friends would start a fight. And he said, you'd all stick out like a sore thumb. And besides, if you got in and somebody found out you didn't belong, it wouldn't go well for you. You don't belong. So he said, you ever get bribed? Anybody ever try to give you money? He says, all the time, every night. But he said, this is kind of serious. He said, guys I work for, they're serious. They ain't sloppy. There's no amount of money going to make up for that mistake. Now that's security, right? I mean, it's like being a Roman guard. They should be, those guys running that club should be running the Secret Service. And that's how Solomon is telling us to guard our hearts. You ain't getting in here, man. You don't belong. Those thoughts, those influences, they don't belong. You got to recognize them. And there's no amount of pleasure, no amount of power, no amount of popularity that makes up for letting the wrong people in your heart. See, that guy we met, he understood the consequences. It was made very, very clear to him. That's the job. For what we let in, Solomon says, becomes the wellspring of life. What do I want my life to stand for? He says, listen, carefully. Listen, this is a great lesson. There is no such thing as an inconsequential, undisciplined day. Don't be fooled. Consequences don't come right away, but they come. I have numerous friends in recovery. And now, I run This One Voice, which is a recovery ministry. So I've met many, many people in recovery. Recently, I was talking to one, and he said to me, listen, I'm an addict. That ain't changing. That's always there waiting for me. There's no wading back into that life. It's always there, and I must have, on a daily basis, diligence. My dad quit drinking. I said to him, and I always knew him as drunk. I said, so you're not drinking anymore? And he said, I'm not drinking today. I can't promise you that, but I can promise you I won't drink today. Because there's only 3 destinations. The wellspring for that mistake is jail, rehab, or the morgue. And let me tell you something. In the 15 years I've been running This One Boys, I have seen all 3 happen. But make no mistake, health, happiness, and fulfillment are not the options for letting the wrong things in your heart. My dad struggled with alcohol for most of my growing up, but he was able to get sober and stay sober till he died. But we had a neighbor, this guy was crazy, Mr. Neely. I probably shouldn't say his name, it's too late now. But his basement, the whole basement, some people have like a living room, living spaces, all liquor. Cases of beer, boxes of scotch. And so my dad was there fixing something for him one day, and he says, hey, Andy, you want a drink? And my father said to him, 1 drink would be too much. And all of this liquor, it ain't enough. He understood. He was just not going to let that first one in. What my dad understood is there's no such thing as an inconsequential, undisciplined day. Because the wellspring of that event, if he took that drink, would be he'd lose his family. Because my mother was not allowing that back in the house again, and he clearly understood that. What do you want the wellspring of your life to look like? Listen, remember this, man. There is no such thing as an inconsequential, undisciplined life. Ask Adam. Adam had a bad day. He lost track of Eve. Thousands of generations have paid for that mistake. An undisciplined day. And finally, Solomon warns us, watch your mouth and guard your gaze. Rid yourself of a deceitful mouth and keep devious speech from you. Our lives rise and fall to the level of our conversations. And what does that actually mean? I don't know, man. What are you talking about? What are you listening to? Are you gossiping? Are you listening to gossip? Some people in our lives have just endless, meaningless opinions and just stupid jokes. You know any of those people? I'm looking at a lot of them. Look at the internet, really. I mean, really. I was just talking to Matt. Some of my high school friends posted, they just hate. Their vision is blinded by hate. And after Donald Trump was shot, some of them posted, oh, it was fake. He staged the whole thing. Now, I usually don't comment. I just let it, because I don't want to get into this whole big thing. But I said to him, you are ignorant and insensitive. And they came back with stuff, oh, you don't know him. I said, let me tell you something, man. My mom didn't raise me like that, to say those stupid things. Could you imagine that meeting? Hey, we're going to stage an assassination. Somebody's going to rush the stage? No. We got a guy who's going to shoot the side of your ear. Okay, is this a sharpshooter? Well, it's a 20-year-old kid, a malcontent. Okay, wow. He's going to be 150 yards away. And then, can you imagine that? How insane is that to stage that? Endless, stupid. Look, what is fueling your opinions? It's fueled by hate. That just goes nowhere. And lastly, Solomon says, keep your eyes on the prize. Let your eyes look directly ahead. Don't let your gaze be fixed. Keep your gaze fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. You all know Mario Andretti, famous race car driver, right? Somebody asked Mario Andretti, what's the secret to race car driving? You know what he said? Don't look at the wall. If you look at the wall, you will drive into it. Keep your eyes on the track, right? Keep your eyes on the track. We were driving some of the roads, Colorado. You're on a mountain and you're coming down and you're weaving, and there's other people that they're oblivious to it. And my wife says to me, "You're not afraid to die, are you?" I said, "Well, no, I'm not afraid to die, but I'm really not keen on dying right now. I'm keeping my eyes on the road." Because she'll say, "Oh, look at that, it's beautiful. Don't look." Keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on the road. I love this song. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of the earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Keep your eyes on him. Everything else will grow strangely dim. And don't turn to the right or the left. And what Solomon says is, turn your foot from evil. Whatever is the strongest focus will have the greatest drawing power. What are you focusing on? And how do we do that? What is the discipline in doing that? Paul gives us a great exercise, some tools on how to guard our hearts. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he says, we are destroying arguments and all arrogance raised against the knowledge of God. And we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Take every thought captive and interrogate it. In this one voice, we identify certain patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that sabotage our lives and ruin our relationships. And these patterns, look, typically adopted in childhood because they worked in childhood to survive. But they no longer serve us in adulthood. We don't have to react anymore, we can direct. We don't have to adopt the roles that we played as children. They become our emotional homes. We need to find a new home, and that home is Christ. And the key to this one voice is we become aware of these patterns. Self-awareness is very strong, and we recognize when they appear, and we take them captive and subject them to the obedience of Christ. And Solomon ends with, watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. These patterns or paths to do the wrong thing will always be there. But Solomon calls us to self-awareness. Whatever is the strongest focus will have the greatest drawing power. Let that strongest focus be the path to Christ. In light of that, we're going to focus on communion right now. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul introduces us to the power of communion. And basically what Paul is saying is, behold and beware. Because the supper here encapsulates the gospel, the substitutionary death of Christ. It is holy, it is sacred, it is set apart. And so Paul says, behold. This act here calls us to mind the greatest event in history, the most colossal event in history, and we should receive that this way. So he says, For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the same night he was betrayed, he took the bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And in the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Paul's saying, behold. This sacred moment, we proclaim his death until he comes. In the tradition I grew up in, we had bells and incense, and we had silence and standing and kneeling. But it was a call to attention. And the call to attention is, this is not common. This is holy. We should call it smells and bells, right? To call our attention. And Paul is essentially saying, hey, behold what you're doing here. But he also says, beware. Verse 27, 1 Corinthians 11, he says, therefore, whoever eats this bread and drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. I never understood what that meant, right? I don't want to be guilty of that. I never really understood, and I did some research on it, right? There's so many ways where we can come to this table in an unworthy manner. It's not just sins that we're carrying, but we can participate in a ritualistic manner, right? Not bringing our hearts and our minds to what this really means. It's just something we do. You know, one Sunday in the month, and we do it. And we go through the motions, and we do it. Or we can come with the misconception that somehow this saves me and gives me grace and merit with God. But it's not the ceremony that gives us grace. It's what we're pointing towards. It commemorates something greater. Communion doesn't save us or keep us saved. It's where we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. And some people come with a spirit of bitterness or hatred toward another person. You got stuff on your mind. And that's coming in an unworthy manner as well. There's a great song by the Avett Brothers. It's called No Hard Feelings. When I first heard this song, man, this song changed my heart. These guys are Christians. And the words, the first verse says, when my body won't hold me anymore, when I'm ready to die, and it finally lets me free, will I be ready? When my feet won't walk another mile, my lips give their last kiss goodbye, will my hands be steady? When I lay down my fears, my hopes and my doubts, the rings on my fingers and the keys to my house, with no hard feelings. What he's saying is, when I die and I go meet Christ, when I'm really in his presence, am I bringing any hard feelings with me, or have I just left them all behind? And they end their concert with this, having everybody sing with them, I have no enemies. I have no enemies. Finally, one scholar wrote, if a believer comes with anything less than the loftiest thoughts of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and anything less than total love for his brothers and sisters in Christ, they come unworthily. So I'm going to ask you to just take a moment of silence here. Just close your eyes. I don't know how long I'll take, but just close your eyes and just, if there's something there, whether you're taking it lightly or you come with some bitterness or you've allowed anger to come with you today, I'm going to ask you to examine your intentions and say, God, no hard feelings. No hard feelings. I ask you now to take both the body and the blood and have communion in a different way, maybe in a different way than you've ever done it before, and go away, not only with having received communion, but really pointing to his death until he comes. So I invite you to take it. As we leave this morning, there'll be members of the care team up here to pray with you. Anything you want to pray about. Let's say you want to know more about Christ, you want to know more about Landmark. They'll be happy to pray with you. We'll have prayer partners in the back and outside as well. They'll be wearing the lanyard. So let me close with this prayer. I love this blessing by Paul in Ephesians chapter 3. So bow your heads and let me put God's name on you. You know, God said to Moses that as often as you bless my children, you put my name on them. So you'll be going out today with God's name on you. I pray that God would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened in power through his Spirit in the inner self, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. Amen.